Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're really plunging into a major piece of cinema, the 1978 American epic war drama, The Deer Hunter,
It's definitely a film that leaves an impression.
for sure. And we've got quite a stack of material to work with. Its Wikipedia page, a really interesting retro review, a filming locations guide, and even a Reddit discussion.
Sounds like a good mix. So, what's the plan?
Well, our mission, basically, is to unpack what made this film, well, so significant, both when it first came out and, its lasting legacy.
Okay, so looking at production, themes, the controversies, the whole package.
Exactly. We want to explore that whole journey, concept to screen, the big ideas it tackles, and yeah, definitely the controversies it sparked.
Got it. It's a film that still gets people talking.
It really does.
Yeah.
Now, just to set the scene quickly, for anyone maybe less familiar, The Deer Hunter focuses on three main characters, right? Slavic American steelworkers from Clairton, Pennsylvania.
A small, tight-knit community.
Yeah. And their lives are just completely upended, forever changed by the Vietnam War.
And the cast. Pretty stellar. Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, John Savage leading the way.
Absolutely. And you can't forget Meryl Streep and John Cazale in really crucial supporting roles.
And it's worth mentioning, isn't it, that this was Cazale's last film. He was terminally ill during production.
Such a poignant and sad detail. It really adds another layer of emotional weight, I think, to his performance in the whole film.
Definitely does.
So right off the bat, the film's scope is just huge, epic, really,
It moves from this very specific, intimate world of the steel town.
to the absolute brutality of the war and then the aftermath, the psychological scars.
Yeah, it digs into these heavy themes, male friendship, the impact of war on, well, everyone, individuals, communities.
And that feeling of American disillusionment that was so prevalent at the time. Okay, so where did this whole thing even start? How did The Deer Hunter actually come about?
Well, what's really interesting is that the initial idea, the sort of seed for it, came from somewhere else entirely. Yeah, there was this unproduced screenplay called The Man Who Came to Play, written by Louis Garfinkel and Quinn Redeker.
And what was that about?
It was set in Las Vegas, apparently, and focused on Russian roulette, high-stakes gambling.
Okay, so Vegas, Russian roulette. How does that become The Deer Hunter?
Producer Michael Dealey bought that script. He saw something in it. Then director Michael Cimino came on board,
Right.
and he, along with Derek Washburn, rewrote it. They took that Russian roulette element.
And put it into the Vietnam War context.
Exactly. That was the key transformation, from a Vegas thriller to this sprawling war drama.
That's a massive shift. It definitely gives the whole concept much more weight.
Yeah.
Social, political weight.
Absolutely. But you need to know, the story behind the screenplay isn't simple. It's actually quite contentious.
Ah, okay. Tell me more.
Well, you have differing accounts. Cimino's version, essentially, is that he wrote the whole thing. He claimed he conceived it, wrote it, and that Washburn's draft was basically unusable.
Okay, that's one side.
But Washburn tells a very different story. He describes working closely with Cimino, then feeling like he was just pushed aside once the main writing was done.
Right.
He even apparently used a pretty harsh analogy, saying he felt like Cimino used him like a dummy to get the script written.
Wow. So a real dispute over authorship.
Yeah, it really highlights how messy creative collaboration in film can be, you know? Different people remember things very differently.
It certainly does.
Yeah.
So how did it get resolved?
The Writers Guild, the WGA, had to step in and arbitrate.
Mm.
They awarded Derek Washburn the sole screenplay by credit,
Okay.
but the story by credit was shared. Garfinkel, Redeker, Cimino, and Washburn, all four shared that.
Interesting. So despite all that conflict,
All four ended up getting an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay.
Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the casting because, I mean, the performances are just central to this film's power.
Totally central. And getting Robert De Niro was a huge deal for the production.
It wasn't the first choice, though.
No, initially Roy Scheider was cast, but he dropped out. And producer Dealey went hard after De Niro. He felt they needed that star power, especially with a relatively untested director like Cimino tackling such heavy material.
Makes sense. And De Niro got paid pretty well for it.
Reportedly $1 million, which was a lot back then.
Wow. And he really dove into the role, didn't he? Preparing for it.
Oh, yeah. He spent time hanging out with actual steel workers, going to bars with them, visiting their homes, really trying to soak up that world.
You can feel that authenticity.
Yeah.
He even said later it was his most physically exhausting film.
And he mentioned the hospital scene with Steven, John Savage's character, as the most emotionally draining for him.
I can believe it. That scene is tough to watch.
And it was De Niro, actually, who brought Meryl Streep and John Cazale into the picture. He recommended them to Cimino and Dealey.
That's amazing casting intuition right there.
Yeah.
Such pivotal roles.
Absolutely, especially Cazale. And the situation with him, it's just heartbreaking, but also kind of incredible.
Yeah, because he was so ill?
Exactly. He had terminal cancer. The studio, understandably, maybe from a business perspective, was worried and wanted to dismiss him, replace him.
Oh, man.
But Meryl Streep, who was his partner at the time...
She was Linda in the film.
Right. She and Cimino basically said, if he goes, we go. They threatened to walk.
Wow. They really stood up for him.
And then De Niro reportedly stepped in and paid for Cazale's insurance himself. The studio was worried about the costs if he got sicker or passed away during filming.
That's incredible. Just speaks volumes about the respect they had for him.
It really does. So all of Cazale's scenes were filmed first because of his condition.
And sadly, he passed away shortly after finishing his work on the film. Never got to see it released.
Such a loss. A phenomenal actor.
Truly. And Meryl Streep's role, Linda, it wasn't originally that substantial.
Apparently not. The sources say it was initially kind of a negligible role in the script. The Cimino saw her talent.
And let her run with it.
Yeah, he apparently encouraged her to write her own lines to flesh out the character, which she clearly did brilliantly.
It shows how collaboration can really elevate things. And it wasn't just big names either, was it? There was the casting of Axel.
Chuck Aspegren. Right, he was an actual steel factory foreman.
How did that happen?
De Niro and Cimino met him during a location scout or research visit to a steel mill, and they were just really impressed by him. Cast him on the spot, basically.
That adds another layer of authenticity, doesn't it? Someone who actually lived that life.
Definitely. Cimino is clearly aiming for that grounded feel for the Clairton scenes.
And they did other things too, right? To build that bond between the main actors.
Yeah, apparently each of the 6 main guys carried around a photo of themselves as kids.
Like a little reminder of their shared past.
Kind of. And they were given, like, complete sets of fake ID, driver's licenses, medical cards, the whole deal to help them really inhabit those characters.
Small details.
Yeah.
But they probably made a difference. Okay, let's move on to the filming itself. Sounds like it was quite the production, spanning different continents.
Oh, absolutely epic. Let's start with the wedding scenes. They're so important for establishing that community vibe, you know?
It's a whole long sequence of the
It took 5 full days to shoot.
5 days, wow.
Yeah. The church scenes were at St. Theodosius Russian Orthodox Cathedral in Cleveland, Ohio, apparently chosen because it looked like a Russian czar's cathedral.
Okay. And the reception?
That was filmed nearby at a place called Lemko Association Hall. And here's a fun detail.
Yeah.
The extras, the people playing the wedding guests during the reception and dancing scenes, they were apparently drinking real liquor and beer on set.
No way. For 5 days.
Seems like it. Must have been a lively set.
I'll bet. That probably helped the realism, though.
Maybe. And another thing, they filmed it in the summer, but it's set in the fall.
Right. I remember noticing the look. How'd they manage that?
A lot of work. They had to manually remove green leaves from trees in the shots.
Seriously. Pulling leaves off trees.
Apparently so. And then in post-production, they desaturated the colors to give it that cooler autumnal feel.
That's dedication. And the wedding gifts the extras brought were real, too.
Yep. And supposedly, nobody knows what happened to all those gifts afterwards. One of those little movie mysteries.
Love it. Okay, what about Welsh's bar? That's another key location early on.
Right. That wasn't actually a real bar at first. They built it as a set in Mingo Junction, Ohio.
Ah, okay.
But the interesting thing is, after the movie, it actually became a real functioning saloon for a while.
Cool. And the Rolling Rock beer?
Yeah.
That was everywhere in those scenes?
Deliberate product placement, yeah. Very specific choice.
Then there's the steel mill. That looked intense.
For sure. Filming inside U.S. Steel's Central Blast Furnace in Cleveland. That was a major operation.
Dangerous.
Apparently quite dangerous. They needed a huge insurance policy, like $5 million. The place was nicknamed the Widowmaker.
Yikes. Understandable nickname.
Yeah. They also shot other mill scenes in places like Pittsburgh, Steubenville, Weirton, trying to capture the scale of that industry.
Okay, then the setting shifts dramatically to the mountains.
Yeah.
For the deer hunting.
Right. Those scenes were filmed way out west, in Washington State, Mount Baker, Snoqualmie National Forest. Beautiful scenery.
Stunning. And the deer itself. There's a story there too, isn't there?
Yeah, the big stag that Michael lets go at the end, that was apparently the same stag used in Hartford insurance commercials around that time.
Get out. The Hartford stag.
The very same, according to the sources.
That's wild. And the deer that is shot earlier.
Thankfully, that was just hit with a tranquilizer dart. It looked gruesome in the close-up, but the animal wasn't actually killed for the film.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Now, the Vietnam scenes, filmed in Thailand, right?
Correct. Including areas along the River Kwai, ironically enough.
And it sounds like the conditions were pretty rough.
Yeah, the sources mention real rats and mosquitoes being a constant issue on set. Added to the gritty realism, I suppose.
Probably not fun for the actors, though.
Yeah.
And casting the Viet Cong characters, particularly the referee in the Russian roulette scenes. That was difficult.
Apparently very difficult. They eventually cast a man named Somsak Singvilai. And the story goes, he genuinely disliked Americans.
Seriously?
Yeah. And those slaps you see him give the prisoners in the film, reportedly, they were real slaps, not faked.
Wow. Intense.
De Niro even suggested that Singvilai slap Christopher Walken unexpectedly during one take just to get a raw, genuine reaction.
Which you definitely see on screen. That tension is palpable.
And speaking of tension, remember that helicopter stunt where the helicopter skids catch on the rope bridge as the guys are trying to escape?
Yeah, that looked incredibly dangerous.
It was incredibly dangerous. Apparently it wasn't planned. It was a genuine accident during filming.
And they just kept the footage.
Yep. That real moment of peril is right there in the movie.
Unbelievable. Talk about capturing reality.
Ah.
And there was another intense moment involving De Niro and Cazale.
Yeah, this one's pretty heavy. During an impromptu Russian roulette scene between Michael and Stan, De Niro supposedly asked for a live cartridge to be put in the revolver.
A live round. Are you serious?
That's the report. Cazale agreed, apparently wanting that heightened realism too.
But still.
Oh, totally. Cazale, understandably, checked the gun obsessively between takes. Just imagine the psychological pressure of that.
I can't even. Wow. That's extreme commitment.
It really is. Shows how far they were willing to go. Other locations in Thailand included Pat Pong in Bangkok, which stood in for Saigon's red light district.
Okay. And we have to talk about the music. The soundtrack is iconic.
Absolutely essential. That main theme, Stanley Meyer's Cavatina.
Yeah.
Just beautiful and haunting.
It became huge, right? Bigger than the film it was originally written for.
Exactly. It was originally for a film called The Walking Stick. They had to negotiate to use it in The Deer Hunter.
Worth the negotiation, I'd say. And what about the songs the guys sing? Like in the bar?
Can't Take My Eyes Off You. Yeah, that was sung live on set by the actors.
Really? Not dubbed later?
Nope. Cimino wanted them singing along to a playback track right there to capture that spontaneous, communal feeling. You hear it in the bar and at the wedding reception.
It works so well. Feels really natural.
It does. And the use of Russian Orthodox music for the wedding and funeral, contrasting with Chopin in the bar, it all adds to the film's emotional texture.
Definitely. So after all this intense filming, the movie finally comes out.
Yes. Premiered late 78 in L.A., wider release early 79, long film over 3 hours.
184 minutes. Big budget, too, for the time. $15 million.
And it did pretty well at the box office, grossed around $49 million.
And the initial reviews?
Overwhelmingly positive for the most part. Critics were calling it the best American epic since, like, The Godfather.
I praise indeed.
Yeah, they loved the realism, Cimino's direction, the acting, obviously, the way it shifted tones, the tension, and how it captured that post-Vietnam sense of disillusionment.
But there was a but, right? It wasn't all smooth sailing?
Not at all. Alongside the praise, there was immediate and significant criticism. And controversy.
Mostly about the Russian roulette scenes.
Primarily, yes. The depiction of the Viet Cong forcing American POWs to play Russian roulette, that was widely slammed as historically inaccurate. There wasn't really evidence that happened systematically.
Right. It became a major sticking point.
A huge one. The influential critic, Pauline Kael, for instance, pointed specifically to what she called the inscrutable, evil, Oriental-style portrayal of the Viet Cong.
So accusations of racial stereotyping as well?
Yes. Concerns about how the Vietnamese characters were depicted.
And this wasn't just an American debate, was it? It went international.
It absolutely did. At the 1979 Berlin Film Festival, it caused a major incident.
What happened?
The Soviet delegation formally protested the film. They called it insulting to the Vietnamese people.
Why?
And that led to other communist countries walking out in solidarity. Even some jury members resigned in protest.
So a real diplomatic row sparked by a movie.
Pretty much. And some other critics, like Jonathan Rosenbaum and John Simon, were even harsher. They basically called the film simplistic, bigoted, even an extension of old Hollywood war movie lies.
So really polarized opinions, love it or hate it almost.
Very much so. It really struck a nerve. And even the people involved in making it had different takes on the historical accuracy and intent.
Like Walken and De Niro.
Yeah, they tended to frame it more as, well, these things could have happened. An imagined possibility rather than a strict historical claim.
And the producers.
Well, Barry Spikings later expressed some regret about the Vietnamese portrayal, admitting maybe they didn't know enough.
But Michael Dealey defended it.
Strongly. He argued it wasn't meant as literal history, but as a parable about how people react under extreme pressure. He saw the Russian roulette as an allegory for the dehumanization POWs face.
An allegory for trauma.
That was his argument. He even claimed some veterans he spoke to felt it captured something true about their experience, even if the specific event wasn't factual.
Interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And Cimino himself, he called it personal, autobiographical.
He did, frequently, though later on, people looked into his background and found, let's say, inconsistencies with his personal accounts of military service and things like that.
Okay. And the ending, that caused a stir too, right? Singing God Bless America.
Oh, yeah. Huge debate. Was it meant sincerely? Was it ironic? A critique?
What did Cimino say?
He described it as a statement of communion. These broken people finding solace in a song everyone knows, bringing them back together as a kind of family in a time of, as he put it, spiritual sickness.
So not necessarily straightforward patriotism, but something more complex.
That was his explanation, though not everyone bought it. William Goldman, the screenwriter, he famously called The Deer Hunter a well-disguised comic book movie.
Ouch. That's pretty cutting.
Shows the range of reactions. And then there's the Heaven's Gate factor.
Cimino's next film, the legendary flop.
Exactly. It bombed so spectacularly that some critics actually went back and revised their opinions of The Deer Hunter, became a bit more critical in hindsight.
That's fascinating. The ripple effect of failure.
Kind of. But despite all that, The Deer Hunter cleaned up during awards season.
Big time at the Oscars, right?
5 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director for Cimino, Best Supporting Actor for Christopher Walken.
His performance is unforgettable.
Truly. Also won for Best Film Editing and Best Sound. Plus, nominations for De Niro, Streep, the cinematography, and that controversial screenplay.
So the Academy clearly embraced it, despite the pushback.
Mostly. But there was drama even around the awards, reports of lobbying against the film, supposedly by Warren Beatty, and public criticism from people like Jane Fonda. There were even demonstrations outside the Oscars ceremony protesting the film as racist.
Wow. A lot going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and De Niro himself didn't even attend the Oscars that year. Said he had too much anxiety about it all.
I can maybe understand why, given the climate around the film.
It was intense, but ultimately its place in film history was cemented. It was added to the National Film Registry in 1996.
Which is a major honor, recognizing its significance.
Definitely. Though there's a darker side to its legacy, too. Those reports of suicides allegedly linked to the Russian roulette scenes.
Yeah, that's deeply disturbing. An awful unintended consequence.
Highlights the power of images for sure. But still, many filmmakers and actors, Milo Forman, Mickey Rourke, consider it one of the greatest films ever.
And David Thompson, the critic, argued it actually changed how war battles were shown on film.
Yeah, he felt it brought this raw, unleashed, chaotic feeling to screen combat that was influential.
Okay, let's bring in some of those other sources. The Reddit discussion you mentioned. What did people focus on there?
A lot of comments about how immersive the first part of the film is, how you really feel like you get to know these guys, become part of their group.
Which makes the second half, the war and its aftermath, even more devastating.
Exactly. That connection amplifies the impact. Someone specifically mentioned the bar scene, where the mood shifts so drastically when the piano player starts playing Chopin. How powerful that moment is.
Yeah, that's a standout moment, the calm before the storm almost.
And one user pulled out that line. Michael says, "You know something? The whole thing, it's right here. I love this fucking place."
Capturing that sense of belonging before everything falls apart.
Right. Seeing that as a core theme. And the retro review we looked at.
What was its take, looking back?
It basically argued that The Deer Hunter might be the single best film ever made about the effects of war, not just on soldiers, but on their whole community, how it ripples outwards.
That's a strong claim, highlighting its enduring impact.
Yeah, underscoring its power to still connect emotionally, despite the historical debates.
And people are still analyzing it today, right?
Yep.
looking at masculinity, trauma, Cimino's artistic choices.
Absolutely. It remains a rich text for discussion.
So wrapping this up,
Mhm.
it's clear The Deer Hunter is, well, a monumental film. Hugely ambitious, undeniably impactful.
For better or worse, depending on your perspective.
Right. It gave us this incredibly powerful, if controversial, look at how war reached into the heart of American life.
Driven by those amazing performances, the striking visuals.
And a story that, whatever its factual basis, still sparks debate about history, memory, and trauma.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought to leave listeners with.
Okay.
Given all the conflicting stories about how it was made and the intense arguments about how it portrays the war and the Vietnamese people, what does The Deer Hunter's enduring power really tell us?
Tell us about what?
About our need, maybe our complicated relationship with trying to represent these huge, traumatic historical events on screen. How do we do it? Can we ever get it right?
That's a really good question to chew on. How do we tell these stories?
Yeah.
Especially when they're so painful and contested.
Exactly. Food for thought.
Definitely. And look, we've covered a lot, but there's still so much more to The Deer Hunter. We really encourage everyone listening to watch it again or for the first time.
And maybe seek out some of those critical analyses, read about the historical context.
Yeah, form your own opinions. Think about what resonates with you, what questions it raises for you now.
It's a film that rewards deeper engagement.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.